Hello, and welcome to another episode of Acceptable Madness, the podcast for depressed people, or also just inner thoughts that I have that I like to monologue. Today, I actually wanted to, I feel like this will be a bit more of a philosophical episode, and not because I'm trying to impose my philosophies, but just because I've been having some different thoughts based on just things going on in my life that, I don't know, it might be interesting to hear, maybe helpful, I don't know. I make the podcast. I can make it about whatever I want. So, but the title of this is Morality and Intelligence, and I just kind of wanted to touch upon that. So, if you've listened to the other episodes, you know where I am in my life. I recently started working. I very recently graduated college, and so I'm technically a professional, or at least in the field of choice that I'm in. And what's becoming increasingly obvious to me is this understanding that people are just people, and being special and people being unique, it's weird. So everybody's unique, and everybody has their own merit, and everybody has, beneficial qualities. And if they use those qualities correctly, then they can really make an impact on the people around them and the people that they know. So that's one thing. But what I mean whenever I say people are just people is that everybody has their flaws, and I used to have this thought that was very much that everyone is, I don't want to say immortal, because that's obviously not true, but it's that thing that you hear whenever like you talk to someone that's older than you, and whenever you're going through high school and college, where young people think that they're invincible and they're on top of the world. And as you grow older, I still think I'm invincible and on top of the world, and that nothing wrong can happen to me. I have no problem admitting that, because I don't want stuff to happen to me. If it does, fuck it, shit happens. But I don't want to kind of live in fear of that happening, so I pretend that it can't, while still making reasonable and non-destructive decisions. But what I've found out is that just through some of the recent decisions that I've had to make in my own life, is that nobody knows what's going on, and nobody has any idea how to run their life, and everybody's just kind of doing their own thing until something works out, or until they realize that what they've done doesn't work out and they need to adjust and do something differently. And that's a weird feeling. Whenever I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to major in, because I knew I wanted to have an impact on the world. And at that moment, the idea that I had was, well, I'll try to cure cancer. And in my naivete, I was like, well, yeah, that seems reasonable. And then I went to college for computer engineering, because in the short span of like 1 or 2 years, I realized that maybe I didn't want to cure cancer. Maybe I wanted to develop a product and start a business. And then after that, I changed to marketing after 1 year of engineering. So I still hold that over my engineering friends that got the degree, because having 1 year of engineering literally means nothing, because that's basically gen eds and some intro level classes that I was not very good at and didn't like. So instead I changed to marketing, which is where my interests lie, in business and psychology. And I wanted to pair those things together. So trying to understand strategic planning and marketing for a business, it involves both of those things. And then after I got out after 3.5 years of total schooling, so 1 year of engineering, 2.5 of marketing, and then I started working. And once you're in the real world, you start to talk to people that are just going through life, and it's really weird, because you'll talk to people that are 10 years older than you, 20 years older than you, and they're just kind of talking out loud as if you could talk. otherwise. Ignore that. But basically, it's just these questions and problems that they have no idea how to respond just because they're simply in a different part of their life. Like, for example, I have a coworker who isn't exactly sure what direction to take his kid right now, because she's been having some issues and he wasn't exactly sure how to respond to it. And I clearly can't help with that. I'm 22. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I have no immediate plans for kids. But hearing that, I knew that I couldn't say anything. I couldn't really weigh in on that conversation, because I just didn't know anything about it. And I've never met his kids. I've never met his wife. So I knew that I couldn't contribute to that in a thoughtful and productive way. And at the moment, that didn't seem so weird. So I basically told him, like, hey, like, I'm more than willing to listen and help you out in that way, in that regard. Maybe you can talk through it and kind of figure it out on your own. But I can't offer any advice that you probably haven't already thought of. But there were other people in the office. And I'm not saying this to be negative or malicious towards anybody, but there were other people in the office that don't have experience or the kind of experience that he has with kids, especially with his own kids. And they were offering this advice like it was truth, not as if he had these options that he could take, but as if these were the decisions that he should make. And this was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. So the reason that it came up now is, and I know this will feel like a tangent, but it'll all kind of come back together. But I'm reading the book Flowers for Algernon. And I don't know if you know anything about it, but basically, this guy who has an IQ of 68 and is in a school for, in the book, it's literally called a school for retarded adults, where he's trying to read and write. And a special procedure is performed on him. And basically, its goal is to hyperinflate his intelligence and to make him smart and a productive member of society. Not to say that this is what the book says, so I'm not trying to speak negatively of anybody, but that's how the book is. And the guy's name is Charlie. Algernon is a mouse who had the experiment happen to him earlier, and then he was the test case for Charlie. But Charlie just encountered a problem where he works at a bakery, and so he is just now kind of understanding morality, intelligence, a lot of different concepts that everybody else goes through. But the pace at which he's going through them is so accelerated that it was really interesting to read, and it actually made me think about a lot of the things that have just been going through my head too. And basically what ends up happening, though, is he works at this bakery, and a coworker of his is constantly stealing from his boss because he basically just undercharges customers and then pockets the difference. So, or they'll pay him so that they don't have to pay the full price for whatever they're buying. And Charlie sees this, and he is disgusted. He's basically, this is the first time he's noticed it. He's worked at the bakery for over a decade. And it's the first time that he's seen him stealing, because in the past he wasn't really able to notice that kind of difference, or that he was doing something wrong. And he sees this and has this huge dilemma where he can't decide whether he should go and tell his boss that his coworker is constantly stealing from him, if he should keep it to himself, or if he should take some other approach. And he's confused because he feels that now that he knows and now that he has this knowledge, and since their boss has been very pleasant and nice to them, that he's as guilty as the person stealing because he isn't, because he has this knowledge and should share it, or at least should try to make a difference and make it morally correct. But he's confused because he's never had to experience a decision or a thought like this. So what ends up happening is he has to talk with a lot of different people that are still trying to guide him through this experiment that he's going through to make him more intelligent. And people keep giving him different answers, like, you need to stay out of it, or you need to tell your boss, Or he talks to one person who is the most helpful, at least in my opinion, of all the people in the book. And basically, she just tells him, you need to figure it out on your own, because that's the only way that you'll be happy, and that nobody has this magic answer that's going to make everything better. And relating it back to the last podcast that I did, which is the Catch-22 podcast, it just hit me like I was an idiot. Like, it hit me like a brick just hit me in the side of the face, where I've been having these particular issues and I've never known what the proper decision is. So I've been going to these people that they'll have more wisdom or answers, like my parents or my friends or other people that have gone through it, and some people that haven't, and that I'm basically just looking to kind of confide in because I'm confused. And every time I walk away from those conversations a little bit unsatisfied, because I'm like, well, nobody helped me. I'm no better than I was 20 minutes ago. What was the point of that conversation? And the slow transition that I've had from college and I guess just being an adult in the real world, and noticing that everybody has their own views and opinions, that and nobody is really right most of the time. Not saying that people are wrong, but just there are so many different thought processes and ways to think about stuff that it's hard to know who's right or wrong, and there's no way of knowing what a right decision is ever. And humanity as a whole has recently become a lot more grounded for me, and nobody feels like a superhero anymore. Like, I look at, someone that's created a massive company, and I don't think, wow, that person's this super hyper genius. I think that this guy's like Bezos, who has Amazon. I mean, I don't think of this guy as this perfect embodiment of a business owner. I think of him as a guy who's dedicated his whole life to Amazon, and actually he just announced that he's getting divorced from his wife. So that's clearly, I mean, maybe there's I don't know them, I don't talk to them, so maybe there was some problems within the relationship, but it also could have been based on the fact that he was so invested and dedicated to Amazon that there were strains on his marriage. And there's a lot of intrigue that can go into that, but there's no reason to make assumptions or to think about it and put either of them under a negative light, because I don't understand the situation. And I mean, even in what I just said, in saying that there's no reason to put them under a negative light, it feels odd to say that. Not because I believe differently than what I just said, but it's because I know so many people out there that'll just start pointing fingers and be like, well, Bezos is an animal. He should have put less time into his company and more into his marriage. Or the other side of the spectrum, which is, well, Bezos' wife needed to understand that he has to put this time into this company, and that she should have been more supportive of his goals. And I don't believe anybody that says either of those, unless it's like they're, if they have a relationship counselor or either of them. And even then, even both of them in the marriage, they were married for over 20 years. Like, they'll have different views. And all I'm really trying to say is that nobody's perfect. And maybe it took me way too long to figure that out. But I'm also realizing that I feel like there are a lot of people out there that never really figure it out, so it's a good lesson to learn. So I can go into a conversation that I know little to nothing about and have no problem admitting that. I don't know anything about cars. I don't like them. I don't think they're very fun. I would much rather take my car to a shop and get overcharged by some asshole behind the counter who knows I don't know anything about cars than learn about cars myself. And I have no problem admitting that. But I can also have a conversation with someone, be comfortable telling them that I know nothing about cars, but like, you know the basic amount. I mean, I own a car, so I know at least a little bit. And I know, talking to some people, that they don't know anything about cars, but they have this belief that they know everything about them. And it's weird. So it's just, I don't know, it's just different strokes, and it's a lot of stuff that I've been kind of encountering recently. And the reason that I wanted to bring up the morality and intelligence side is that for me personally, and this might be a controversial view, I don't know. What I've found out is that, and I'll relate it back to Flowers for Algernon because it just makes sense. And so you have Charlie Gordon, who has this hyperinflated intelligence, and he's basically discovering the world for the first time. And he has this question of what should I do? Because I feel like part of the blame is on me. If I morally know that something is wrong and I don't do anything about it. And it made me think. Because he's right. In terms of morality, depending on your view of morality, he's absolutely correct. In my opinion, if you know something is problematic or that there's negative connotation there or that someone is doing something genuinely wrong and it's having a negative effect on someone, no matter the quality of the person that it's having a negative effect on, it's wrong. And it didn't take him being a genius to figure that out. The reason he didn't notice before was because he just didn't really have that kind of awareness. But he does now, which is good. And that's, well, the premise of the book. But it was interesting to see him go through that thought process and bring up this problem to a lot of different people who had a lot of different stances. But it basically, whenever he decided that he needed to figure it out for himself, what he ended up doing is he brought it up to the person stealing and basically said, if you don't stop, I'm going to have to tell him, which is his roundabout way of getting it to stop, not having this guy who's stealing lose his job, and not having his boss learn that he's been betrayed or having one of his employees steal from him for so many years. And that was his approach, and I thought it made sense. I'm not saying it was the right or wrong approach, but I thought it made sense. And it was just, I don't know. Like I said, it's just really been making me think. Just going through my own life, realizing that nobody's perfect, and that all these people, in whatever position they're in, whether it's the principal of a school, chancellor of a university, a plumber that comes to your house and fixes your toilet or anything. It's just all these people who are no different from anybody else. But everybody thinks that they're really different. One of the experiences that I've had recently that blew my mind was I went up to Buffalo, New York, because I was visiting a friend who transferred colleges. And I went up with a few of my friends. And we were sitting in a restaurant. And we were just having a conversation. And right next to us was another group of people having a conversation. And I sat there for a second, and I got distracted from our conversation by this thought. So it blew my mind that there were just two separate groups of people that have never met, never had any engagement or experiences with each other, living their own lives. But because I'm me and you're you, it's impossible to relate to them on that kind of level and understand they're living their own life and that they're the same person as you, basically, just going through different steps with different philosophies and different upbringing and different brains. So yeah, there's a lot of differences, but there's no change. A lot of people, Jeff Bezos got to where he's at because he was smart and he understood business and he learned a lot about business. I'm not saying he was inherently intelligent. He had to have been at least a little bit, but he learned a lot and trained himself a lot. And there's no difference between me and him except drive and passion and interest. So, and that might sound arrogant, but I also want to say that you're no different from them either. I'm not saying you'll be the next Jeff Bezos or the next Bill Gates, because the circumstances around how they came to their point of prestige and financial power it happened at a really unique shift in economic and I don't know, technological advancements. So I'm not saying that's going to happen for you. But what I am saying is that I think if you sat down with Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates and you had a conversation with them, if you walked into it open-minded and they walked into it open-minded, you'd be able to have a good conversation. I wouldn't. I'd be super anxious and I'd be really overwhelmed by the fact that I'm talking to the richest people in the world. But you might. And I don't know. And it's so... And maybe everything I've said during this whole podcast is really obvious to you. Maybe you've come to these conclusions far before I have, and you learned that nobody's different and it's just people living life. And that's great. And I thought that I knew that, and I thought that I understood that. And I'm not saying that this book just had this weird revelational moment for me, but it just kind of summed up some of the thoughts that I'd been having but wasn't able to communicate into my own words. And the reason that I wanted to bring up morality and intelligence is not because I think that Charlie in Flowers for Algernon is this hyper genius, and because of that, he is this hyper moral person. I basically wanted to put the two together because knowing that I'm no different from someone else in really any regard other than upbringing and mind. So everybody is unique, but everybody's the same. And knowing that is everything. So knowing that I'm no different from you and you're no different from me it means that we should be able to sit down, have a cup of coffee, and just talk and have a good time, even if we have really varying views. Because even if you're a 65-year-old woman who, I don't fucking know, builds tree houses for a living, and then there's me who's in sales and just graduated college and is trying to write books. We're the same person, just at different points in our lives with different interests. And it's weird. And again, you might have already thought you've known all this. You might already know it. I don't know. And maybe I'm the only one that thinks this in depth for stuff like this. But it's really been a unique time for me. I thought college was going to be one of the most transitional times in my mind's life. And it was definitely one of the most transitional times. But I've been out for a little over a year now, and I feel like the amount of knowledge and the amount of insight that I've gotten just from talking with different people is more than I expected to get in a lifetime, and it's wild. And if you ever get the chance to meet a lot of people and sit down and talk to them as opposed to having some sort of an agenda or anything with your conversation, just sit there and really try to take it in. Try not to make judgments. You may not have the same thought process. I'm not saying that everybody I've met in the past year I love, because there are a lot of people that I just have no interest in talking to because my personality clashes with them. And there's no problem with that. But it's just, I don't know. It's so, it makes me think about a lot of the problems that happen today. And I don't want to go too in depth because I don't want to spark any amount of controversy or issues, but like something like racism or, xenophobia. I don't know. It's so fucking stupid. And I'm not saying I'm a genius for thinking that racism and xenophobia are wrong. But what I am saying is it does take a level of intelligence to understand that these people are the same as you, no matter how right or wrong you think they are. And it takes some level of intelligence and morality to understand that maybe they're not so bad. So, and this wasn't meant to be too preachy in terms of racism or xenophobia or current world issues, because I don't want this podcast to be that, so it won't be. But I just kind of wanted to say that having all these thoughts recently have just they've really opened my eyes, and they've really shown me some things that I never thought I'd learn or never thought I'd really encounter. And like whenever I was in college, I met some people and their only goal was to become the next CEO of Apple. And I'm sitting there knowing full well that that will never happen, simply because the circumstances for that are so unbelievably unlikely, and you need to have this amazing type of open-mindedness and just self-awareness to get to that point. And if your thought is, I'm going to be the CEO of Apple, then you are inherently never going to be the CEO of Apple, because you need to do a lot of introspection and self-reflection to get to a point where you realize that maybe you can be the CEO of Apple. You can't just want it and will it to happen. I want to be a published author with all my heart, and I'm never just going to be able to will it to happen. I need to put in a lot of legwork. I've written 2 books, and I don't know if either of them... the first one certainly is not good enough to get published. And I just kind of hit the realization that I don't think the second one is either. And I'm okay with it, because I love writing, and I'm excited to go, and I started the 3rd one, and I can't wait to keep working on it. And I'm actually going to do that after I finish recording this podcast, because I'm so thrilled. And I'm excited for all the legwork that goes into it. And there are a lot of people out there that are excited about the legwork that goes into anything else in their life. Whether they want to be a doctor and they put in the legwork for all the schooling, or whether they want to be a politician and they put in the legwork and all that ass kissing to get to that point. I mean, everybody's unique and everybody's the same. And it takes a lot to see that. So I'm not saying you have to be a genius. I'm not saying you have to be this on this moral high ground. And because if you think you're on a moral high ground and you think you're better than other people, then clearly you've missed the whole point of everything. But all I'm saying is that when you really sit down and talk to someone, don't sit there and think about what they're doing wrong and what you are doing right. Think about what they're doing and how it's different, and how it could lead to the same outcome, and it might lead to totally different outcomes. But in the end, you're like the same people, and you're going through similar struggles, and no one knows what the answer is. But hopefully you're smart enough to eventually get there and really have a positive impact on the people around you. And I think you can. I think everybody can. I mean, think about one example of someone saying that they think everybody is good inside. Like, fucking Anne Frank was hidden in an attic during World War II, and all she had to read was a dictionary, and the only communication she had with people was her family or the shop owner below. And she was still able to think about the fact that deep down everybody's good inside. And the amount of insight that comes, I don't know how old she was. I don't remember. But she was in her teen years, and the amount of insight that it takes for someone going through her teens during the Holocaust and World War II to realize that deep down everybody's good inside is the wildest thing to me. And she must have been one of the smartest people to realize that even in her situation and the terrible time that she was going through, she was able to kind of sit back and reflect and just realize that even though all these negative things were happening around her and eventually to her, that the world isn't all everybody thinks it is. So she's able to sit back and from a distance realize that everybody's good. It's just all these people going through these different problems. And I think that's awesome. So I know everybody's got their own problems. For me, I have a lot of confusion on what to do with my life and how to get there. I never feel like I know what to do, and I always am going to other people. And I think I'm going to start trusting in myself a bit more and trying to make decisions that suit what I think I need in that moment, even if it's really, really wrong. And I think it'll all work out. And it will for you too, as long as you try to keep a level head. Again, this is a podcast for depressed people, so I'm not saying the decision you should take is suicide or negative or anything. But if you're sitting there and you're really having a rough time and you're thinking about, well, maybe I should go to therapy, but I'm not sure what my parents would think or what my schoolmates would think, or I don't know how to go about that or anything. Think about it. Do you think therapy would help you? Maybe? Yeah? Then do it. I know a lot of people are afraid to tell their parents about stuff like this. I was. No parent wants to hear that their kid has suicidal thoughts. That's just a fact. So no matter what, if you tell your parents or you tell someone else, no one's going to want to hear it, but they will be incredibly glad that they know, so that they can help and they can try to point you in the right direction with how they think that they would go through it. So they might not always be right. The ideas might not always totally suit your what you think you would do. But it's still valuable information and insight just the same. So be smart and listen to the people around you and try to make morally conscious and aware decisions based on that. Because I know that it can be really easy to take the I was going to try to make a reference. I know it can be easy to be an asshole and to do stuff that you think is strictly beneficial for you. But in my opinion, it's in the long run just such a waste of time to be so self-obsessed that you kind of ignore or don't understand or don't necessarily empathize with the people around you. It can be really beneficial to hear about that stuff, even if it's not something you've ever gone through, or if it's not something that necessarily ever will apply to you. So, I don't know. That's a philosophical rant. Not rant. Yeah, kind of a rant. From Scott McKinney. I hope you enjoy the podcast. This is episode 10, so I've made it to double digits, which is kind of exciting for me. But if you want some other philosophical type things for me, and you want some writing that might be able to help you with your depression, follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I also have a blog, and there's going to be darker stuff that I write there, and I don't feel comfortable putting that on Facebook or Instagram because I don't want to have my writing have a more or have an adverse effect from what I'm aiming for. But follow me if you're interested. I hope you enjoy the podcast, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.